needed to complete the assessment. So we'll move to the next method, which is food record, sometimes called as food diary. So food record is an estimate. We have two types of food record. The first one is estimated food record, and the second one is weight food record. Normally, we use estimated food record in our practice, but weight food record sometimes being used in when we do research. Okay, so food record or food diary. In estimated food record, respondents will be asked to record all the foods and beverages at the time of consumption, eaten for a specific time period. So every time they eat, they have to bring out their diary or record form and write down what are the foods that they have consumed. Let's say they have breakfast at 9, they have to take up the form and pen and write down the food items. And then when it's time to lunch, when they have completed lunch, they take back the diary and record again. So it is not similar to 24-hour diary call, because in 24-hour diary call, the interviewer meets the respondent at one time and recall all the foods throughout the day in the previous day. In food record, we cannot do that because if you do that, it will be called food recalls. Okay, so food record means you have to record throughout the day. Okay, so you will need to ask the respondents or participant to detail out the description similar to what we do in 24-hour diary call, except that this time we ask the participant to record them in detailed description, brand name, cooking method, ingredients, and so on. And the food portion size in a variety of household measurement will be converted to gram by investigator before calculation. So this time, the participants do most of the job. The job of the investigator or interviewer is just to provide the forms to them and explain how to conduct the food record. And then it's up to the participant to do the rest. Okay, so suitable days of record is normally 3 days, 5 days, or 7 days, because if it is longer, it will be very burdensome to the participant. So when we do weight food record, this is the most precise method available for estimating usual food or nutrient intakes of individual. And this will be essential for dietary counseling, statistical analysis correlation, and regression with biological parameters. So in this weight food record, we ask the subjects or the parents, if it is involves children, caretakers, to weigh all the foods and beverages consumed during a specific time period. So you give them a similar food record or food diary form, but instead of estimating the food portion size, they must weigh all the food that they consume. So let's say they take roti canai for breakfast. So they have to write there roti canai with curry, and then they have to actually measure or weigh the roti canai and put down the weight of the roti canai and curry. Okay, so you think it's easier for the participant compared to 24-hour diary call? What do you think? It's definitely beneficial to the researcher, but do you think it's good for the participants? Anyone?
No, just it makes it tedious for them to, weigh food and record themselves. Sometimes they want to eat outside and then they forgot to bring their diary and all that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. They forget to bring the diary. They forget to bring their weighing scale, the food weighing scale. Normally when we eat our food, Malaysian diet, our diet is a mixed dish. So how to actually weigh each and every component if we just put our foods in a plate and then we eat? So there is some process to do when we use weight food record. Okay, so we can use technologies for food record. Example, we use mobile apps to record this, but this doesn't actually reduce the overall burden to the participant. So this is an example of this is a comparison between estimated food record and weight food record. So in estimated food record, the amount of food and leftover are measured or estimated in household measures. So we just estimate them using sendok, cawan, pinggan, okay? But in weight food record, the food and leftovers are weighed using scales or computerized techniques, okay? So they have to actually weigh the food before and after they complete eating the foods, okay? So, and the researcher, in estimated food record, the researcher will then quantify the household measures by volume and weight. So the researcher need to convert the household measure into volume and weight. But in weight food record, the weight of the foods is ready because the participant will record the weight in their form. Estimated food record is considered less accurate than weight food record and is considered an acceptable method for collecting group food intake. And it puts less burden on the respondent than the weight food record. So if you're given a choice, the respondents are given a choice to choose what is the method that they prefer, they will choose food record when compared with weight record. Okay, because weight record is tedious, like a friend said just now. So in estimated food record, the cooperation rates likely to be higher compared to weight food record. So in weight food record, we'll see some of the respondents stop recording, drop out from the project or study, and so on, because they cannot tolerate the burden to weigh the foods. And estimated food record is as effective in ranking subjects into thirds and fifths as weight record. So when you actually compare between estimated food record and weight food record, estimated food record also can rank the subjects into quartiles of intake, similar to weight food record. But the weight food record is preferred by some researchers for gathering data on individuals, especially when they are doing a randomized controlled trial involving foods, okay? And it requires greater degree of subject cooperation than estimated food record. And the cost of scales may be prohibitive in some instances, but if you are using a low-end scales, it's quite cheap actually. It's around 15 ringgit to 20 ringgit per weighing scale, for food weighing scale, for digital food weighing scale. I've just checked in Shopee. So it depends to how canggih your weights or how accurate your weighing scales that you tend to use in your study. So these are the strength and limitation of food record. So this is for both weight and food estimated food record. So the strength, it did not depend on memory, so they don't have to recall what are the foods they consumed. You can provide detailed intake of data, can provide data about eating habits similar to 24-hour diet record. Multiple day data is more representative of usual intake and reasonably valid up to 5 days. Okay, but there is some limitation because it requires high degree of cooperation from the respondents, and there is a response burden which can result in low response rate when used in large national surveys. So when you use this method throughout the study period, there will be some people who drop out from the study, and we can see a lower response rate. Okay, and subjects must be literate, must know how to write and read, because they are requested to record or write the foods that they have consumed. They must also know how to calculate, okay, a little bit. Takes more time to obtain data, okay, because it's not just one-off like 24-hour diet record. And the act of recording may alter the diet, because you know that when we record foods, it's very tedious. So we tend to choose foods that are easier to weigh or record. Example, instead of taking nasi lemak with sambal paru for breakfast, we just consume 2 slices of bread for breakfast, because it's easier to weigh or record. And the analysis is labor intensive and expensive, similar to 24-hour diet record. Okay. So any question before we move to the next method, or any concerns that you want to share based on your experience?
Doctor, can I ask?
Yes.
Do the subject have to report if they, let's say they're diabetic, they take insulin injection, or maybe they are athletes, so they take like certain drinks to boost their performance? Do they have to report that as well?
You mean in the food record and food 24-hour diet record?
Yeah, both.
So when we are talking about the whole data collection process, of course, they have to report things like that. Supplement intake into the into the questionnaire, the insulin injection time, special meals. Okay, so they will need to report that in both food diary and 24-hour record. But if you are just talking about the normal population, a simple dietary assessment, then it will involve those who are healthy, I assume, not diabetic or cancer patients. So in that method, they don't have to actually record things like that. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. So let's move to the next method. So after this, we will take a break for 5 minutes after this method, yeah, because we have a lot more to cover. So food frequency questionnaires, or in Malay is soal selidik kekerapan makanan. Okay, so or we like to call it FFQ. Is designed to obtain qualitative, descriptive information about usual food consumption patterns. Okay, so it assesses energy and nutrient intake by determining how frequent a person consumes a limited number of foods that are major sources of nutrients. So we have a list of food, and they will tick or answer whether they consume it and how much they consume. So an FFQ consists of 2 components. The first one is a list of food, focus on specific groups of food or particular food, or food consumed for special events or seasons. And this may be extensive to enable estimates of intake. So you can imagine in Malaysia, we have a lot of foods. So the list is very extensive, up to 160 to 250 items. So and also you have a set of frequency of use response categories besides the food, so that the respondents can take or answer the frequency of intake for that particular food. So data from FFQ are often used to rank subjects into broad categories of low, medium, high intakes of certain foods. So and this will be later compared with prevalence and mortality statistics for specific disease within population study. And we can also calculate food scores because there are a lot of tools out there to measure diet quality, healthy eating index, diet inflammatory index, things like that. So you can actually calculate the scores from food frequency data. So there are 3 types of food frequency questionnaire. The first one is a very simple or non-quantitative FFQ. Okay, so if you look at the type of response, we just need to tick if we consume coffee less than a month. And then white bread, we consume 5 to 7 times per week. So we just stick there. But this type of response will not able us to quantify the nutrient intakes of daily food intake of the participant, because this is just a descriptive reporting to show what are the most frequently consumed foods of the participant. So we cannot actually calculate energy intake or protein, fat, carbohydrate, and so on. Okay, in simple and non-quantitative FFQ. The second type is semi-quantitative FFQ. So this is some sort of we are able to quantify, but not that accurate, because we still using methods that we just tick which frequency, but the additional part is for each food item there is a serving size there. So example, coffee, 1 cup, less than once a month. And then if we consume 2 cups in one go, then you have to tick in the 1 to 3 times per month. Okay, and white bread, 2 slices, 4 to 7 times per week. So if you consume 6 slices in a go, so you have to like increase the average use in response, maybe 2 to 4 times a day, maybe. Okay, so that is semi-quantitative FFQ. So it looks simple, but there is some estimation going on in the mind of the respondents compared to non-quantitative FFQ. They just tick according to food intake and the average use in the past, without taking into consideration the portion size and so on. So in semi-quantitative FFQ, we can estimate the nutrient intake because we have serving size there. And then the most accurate is quantitative FFQ, where we have additional column there for each food item. You have the serving size, and we ask them what is their serving size compared to the reference given. The reference is medium. So if they consume more, they will have to take large as the serving size. And we also ask them how often they take the food in terms of per day, or if it's not taken daily, they have to write down the number of frequency per week. And if it is not taken every week, we can tick on the frequency according to per month. Okay, and if it is not consumed every month consistently, we can tick for year. And if we do not consume at all, we can tick at never. An example of quantitative FFQ where we can actually calculate and quantify the intakes of the participant, and we can get the nutrient intake. So any question in this part? Do you want me to repeat? So this is just to emphasize that there is several types of food frequency questionnaire, from the most simple one, which we cannot quantify the nutrient intake, to the most extensive one, where we can actually quantify the food intake accurately. Any question?
I have a question.
Yes, good.
What situation will simple or semi or quantitative FFQ be used here? Under what situation?
Under what situation? It depends to the objective of our research or our work. If you just want to know the frequency of intake, you just want to identify what is the most frequent food being consumed by the population, then we just need simple or non-quantitative FFQ. But if you want to identify the nutrient of the interest, let's say calcium intake of the population, and then relate it to disease risk, then you need to actually quantify calcium intake by using specific quantitative FFQ. But if you think that your respondents might be burdened by your questionnaire, so you can choose to use semi-quantitative FFQ, but with the mind that this won't be as accurate as quantitative FFQ. So there are, it must be determined by the user or researcher to choose which one, and they must be aware of the limitation of each method. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
So, any other question?
Doctor, one question.
Yes.
Many research we got the FFQ, like validated FFQ from many years research that has been done. So is it valid if we can alter the FFQ to adapt with our own research requirement? Is it okay if we change a little bit or what?
Yeah, that's allowable because let's say the FFQ was validated in Kuala Lumpur, maybe, and then you want to use the FFQ in Johor, okay? So you need a little bit of modification in terms of the food, but not that much, because if you change everything, then you have to validate it. But if you just include certain type of foods that's familiar with Johor people, like laksa Johor, example. So you just put laksa Johor into the food list, and then you omit certain food that's not relevant to them. So that is allowable. So that is just a minor modification. Okay. So while you maintain the overall food items being from the original FFQ, but if you change all the food items, then you need to validate it before use. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Doctor.
Any other question? So FFQ is the most misunderstood tool by users, because and also the participants. So when you give the questionnaire to the participants, you have to explain how to fill up the form, because they think that these are the foods that they have consumed daily. They just tick on daily basis, or they just tick based on a weekly basis. So sometimes we are interested to know long-term intake or habitual intake. So the easier way is when they wanted to fill into the day frequency, we must ask them whether they consume it daily consistently. If the answer is no, then we have to move to the weekly column, and then again we have to ask them whether it's consistently consumed weekly. If it is no, then we have to move to month. Example, yeah, when we have nasi lemak and then nasi goreng, kway teow, mee goreng, bihun goreng. So these are all common foods being consumed for breakfast among Malaysian. So based on my experience, maybe you also have experienced them. People will tick daily for all the foods. So they will tick daily for nasi lemak, daily for mihun, daily for mee goreng. In fact, it is not correct because it might be weekly, but and sometimes it might be monthly. Not every week they are able buy nasi lemak. Maybe they take it twice per month, in week 1 and also in week 3. While in the other days, they rotate between each other food. So the tip is the interviewer or the researcher must explain and demonstrate how to fill up the FFQ correctly, or else you will get not good data or false data from the respondents just because they don't know how to fill up the FFQ. And sometimes when we ask how often, we must tell the respondents that you must write down the numbers, because it looks similar for all the boxes. They just tick right in the column for how often. So you will be missing data on the number of frequency for quantitative FFQ if you do not explain them. Even if you explain to them, there will still be some misunderstanding, and they will still do it wrongly. So that's where you have to actually check the questionnaire after they have filled up and rectify any issues before you end the session. Okay, so this is based on experience. Yeah. So these are the strengths and limitation of FFQ. The strength is very easy. It can be self-administered by the respondents. Sometimes an FFQ is machine readable, especially when we use responses using OMR forms like we use in our examination. So that kind of FFQ is machine readable. We don't have experience in Malaysia yet, but in overseas, in America, in UK, in large cohort, they use that kind of FFQ. It is also have lower respondent burden, and this will increase the response rate. FFQ is relatively inexpensive for large sample size because we just print out the questionnaire and give the respondents to fill up, and then when the forms come back to us, we just key in a template, and the template will automatically calculate the nutrient intake for us. So and it's also more representative of intake than a few days of diet record. So because FFQ is used for a longer period, time frame. The design of the FFQ can be based on large population data and considered by some as the method of choice for research on diet-disease relationship. So whenever you are doing studies on epidemiology studies on diet-disease relationship, you will need an FFQ. Okay, so because in diet-disease relationship studies, you will need a large number of sample size. So we cannot go and interview each and every respondents or samples that you want to recruit. So you just distribute the form and then you wait for the forms to come back to you. Okay, but there is some limitation. So there is some possibility for food being consumed by the respondents not listed in the FFQ forms, and this could not reflect the actual food intake pattern. Example, in FFQ we have nasi putih, rice. But then some people might consume brown rice maybe. So that won't be in FFQ unless the researcher adds them into the FFQ. Sometimes they eat things like certain types of quiz, because we have hundreds of quiz, but only the most popular one will be included in the FFQ. So maybe pulut panggang won't be there in the FFQ. Maybe bubur cha-cha won't be there in the FFQ. So because if you list all the foods available in Malaysian market, it will be thousands of food items. I think you get my point. And another limitation is the FFQ will be very lengthy. So in earlier, I've said that FFQs in Malaysia is range from 160 food items to 250 food items, and lengthy lengthy FFQ of food items will actually give an overestimate from the actual intakes, because the respondents might get excited to tick all the foods that we have listed. Okay, although it is not frequently consumed by them, but because it's listed there, they want to tick at least per month, because they cannot actually recall accurately. It depends on the ability of subjects to describe their diet. Okay, so we cannot have a correct answer or accurate answer for all the food items. If you ask even people like us, nutritionists or dietitian, we cannot actually recall the frequency of intake per week or per month or per day accurately, unless our diet is very specific or very structured, which is not true most of the time. So we tend to try new foods. We tend to have certain foods, stocks of certain foods more during certain period of time. So it's actually depend on the ability of the subjects to describe the diet, to just estimate, not accurately recall what they have eaten. Okay, and FFQ must be culturally specific, and food lists must be updated from time to time. So this is related to the question just now. So if we have one type of FFQ, and we can update them with minor modification here and there to add in new foods, to omit other foods that is not consumed frequently. But if you are going to change the structure of the questions, the way you ask, the frequency, and the way the respondents responds to the FFQ, then you need a validation, a revalidation of FFQ. So